I'm not Linda Cardellini. I'm Yvonne Villarreal, and I cover television for the Los Angeles Times. Thank you so much for being here. Let's bring her out. It's Linda Cardellini, our Judy. Judy!
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here.
We're all way more underdressed than Linda.
I was told to get fancy, so I did.
So thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're in the middle of shooting.
I am.
Season 2.
Yes.
So you're going to tell us everything?
I'm going to tell you everything because that's what Liz Feldman would want, the creator. No, I can tell you just basically nothing, other than I'm in it. Hey, hi. I went to college with him.
Oh, cool. But so
I haven't seen you in years.
How was it diving back in?
It was amazing. It really was. And the great part is, it's always daunting when you get the first couple scripts and you think, oh God, I have to go back to work, and am I going to remember this, and am I going to be able to, do all this? And then the second that Christina and I get back together, it's just like, it just is like no time has passed, and it's really easy. It's really fun.
Instagram posts with the hand holding gave us all the feels.
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, let's start, take us back to, when you were approached for this role. What scared you about taking this on?
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot, because I am typically tapped to play a more logical person. And even if it's in comedy, she's more of like even Lindsay Weir, for instance, was, she was logical. And even Velma was logical. So the idea of playing somebody who makes a lot of illogical choices was a delicious idea to me. It was something that I sort of hadn't been tapped to play in any kind of scenario that I wanted to say yes to. So the idea that Judy came in and she had so many things going on at the same time, I love to play more than one thing at once. So the idea that there's somebody who's being dishonest but is very earnest was appealing to me. And just to find a way to play this woman in a way that you would actually, even though it's geared for you to dislike her, I think, throughout the time and watching the show, and I think you guys have 1 and 2, but by 10, I think you really understand Judy and you're rooting for her, and you're rooting for her and Jen to be friends, and that I think was a fun challenge for me.
What I found interesting was, people might describe her as crazy, and what I thought,
sure.
No, but what I liked the way that this show explores is that she's not crazy. Like you said, the things that she does are not illogical, but they're logical to her.
They are to her. That's what I would always make sure that it made sense to me, and always that Judy is trying her best to tell the truth, and she's at any moment could spill it. And so that's the jeopardy that she's always in, is at any moment she wants to tell. And there are moments, and I try to carve some of them out, and even we improvise some of them, where she literally tells the truth. When she says, I hate that person, there's an episode where it's basically she's talking about herself, and she comments, I hate that person. It's a moment of truth. So that was really fun for me to find those moments where she's actually able to say what she really means.
Yeah, no, I thought it was just great the way we upend the sort of crazy woman idea that so often gets placed on women in film and TV. How about, setting the stage with a show like this, your task was sort of in not trying to reveal too much, not telegraphing what's ahead, especially in that first episode. So talk about what that was like for you, arcing that out, how much to sort of play what happens.
Well, it's an interesting dynamic, because it doesn't happen a lot, that in the first episode, you can't know what she's up to until the end. And I love that in the first episode, that the twist at the end is really the twist that you would see in another series happen throughout a whole season. And I liked that it was revealed within the first episode, because it gave me a lot to play. And in that first episode, you're not in on the secret yet. But by the second episode, the comedy sort of comes into play because you're in on the secret with her. And so to make that tweak as I went along was a really fun challenge that I don't think most roles have in them. And so the first time, it has to be under there, but I wanted it to be there enough that if you watched it a second time, you could see where her tells were a little bit. And then from then on, she's sort of, sometimes when she's, when she's alone with the camera, she's alone with you, and we're all in on the secret. I liked that about it as well. And the roles like that don't necessarily come along a lot, and I just thought that was so fun. It was so delicious and daunting at the same time. And so I asked Liz Feldman, who is our showrunner and our creator, I said, you know what this tone is, because at first we weren't even sure exactly what the tone is. It could go very broad, it could go very dark, it could go, and it's somewhere in between. And I said, I would like to play it from 0 to 10, and I'll give you some choices that are very, very subtle so that nobody would know what I'm talking about, but those play almost serious, and then some middle ground, and then some very broad, and you let me know what we pick. And so we did that throughout, and she'd go, okay, now do one, your choice, whatever you haven't done yet, do that. And we would go in and out, and she lets us improv, and it was a really collaborative experience that way.
So then would you go back and watch to see what she picked? Like,
we can't watch.
Played out?
We can't watch. But when I saw the show, yeah. But once I realized what vein she was going for, after like several episodes, you sort of get into the rhythm of it. And then some you just push for fun, because the further out you go, you sometimes get like a really fun improv. Like there would be things that Christina and I would be doing that were so absurd that ended up in the show. There's a conversation, spoiler alert, there's this conversation about a penis at one point in the car after there's a breakup, and that whole thing was just improvised by us, and we were sort of just joking around with each other and having a good time, and Liz like, I like that, do that part about this again, and so then we ended up putting that in the show. So it's stuff like that, like we're able to sort of go out of bounds, but we always do what's on the page. But it's that liberty that she, that freedom that she gives us that was really fun.
And she sort of let you in on what was going to happen through the season. And I wonder, like, what is your preference? Because sometimes you hear from actors that they want to know what they're aiming for. And then sometimes you hear from actors that they want to experience it like someone might in life, or they don't know what's happening tomorrow. And I know you had a bit of that, like on Mad Men, where you didn't know what was happening. Like, do you have a preference?
I typically like to know. I studied theater, and the whole play when you sort of go in. I typically like to know, but as time goes on, especially like right now we're shooting, and we're on episode 7 and 8, and there are some things that I don't know what are going to happen. And I know if I ask, I'll get the answer, but there's a part of me that doesn't want to know. But certain things at the first season I really did want to know, because all of those things play into decisions that she makes all along. So I think some things, it depends on if it's something that is a motivator, if there's something that I've done, if it turns out that I've lied about something because of something else that you'll find out a few episodes later, I like to know. And if it's something that happens to me, I don't necessarily need to know. But if it's something that's coming from if it's like, I don't know, like a motivator for me, then it helps. But like Bloodline, we didn't know a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff that was like held back, but I always tried to ask as much as I could, but they didn't give us the answers all the time.
Tell me about forming or establishing this chemistry with Christina. Like, what were you sort of expecting out of the dynamic that you would have, and how did it shift as the series went on? Like the real life bond, and how it sort of helped the on-screen bond.
I wasn't sure, what to expect. I'd heard nice things, and Jessica Elbaum, who's our producer, who I had also worked with on 2 movies, said, I know you and I know Christina, and you guys are going to love each other. And I thought, well, that's great. And oftentimes you hear that about people, and then you're like, okay, well, I'll just judge the chemistry when I see it. But the first time I met Christina, we were at lunch, and we just got along immediately. And it was as if no time had ever passed, that we had known each other for forever, and we were just sitting there talking about everything. And I think that the exciting part about it is being on set, because then, you can have a wonderful conversation with somebody, you can be great friends with them, and then when you start to work, it can feel different than that. And that wasn't the case. It was just really easy. And I think that, like, I think she brings out the best in me as Judy, and I think it's just the chemistry between the two of us it's really it's a gift for me as an actor. It's really fun to play. And we're so night and day. Our characters are so night and day that it just it's easy to invent things to sort of, improv or that. And that friendship, I think, comes from I think we're both pretty open with each other. And that's really nice. And I think we rely on each other, which I think I know she has my back, and I know that she knows that I have her back. And I think there's something really, when you're working, I mean, we work really long days on the show. And so when you're working with somebody 14 hours a day and you're in every scene together, if you don't have that, it can be a lonely experience, and it's definitely not. There's like such a camaraderie and there's just such a beautiful relationship there. I'm really lucky.
Because what do you do when you're not vibing with somebody that you need to vibe with on screen? Like, I've had to write stories with people where I'm like, this isn't working, but we need to do it, and I don't know how to overcome this. Like, what do you do in those situations where it's not clicking, but you need to make it look like it's clicking?
That's a good question. I don't know what it is, but I have this thing that, like, somebody will say, oh, so-and-so is difficult to work with, and I will end up having a wonderful experience with that person. So I think that I think for me personally, just as a person, which I think I share with Judy, is I tend to look for the positive in a person, and I give people a real benefit of the doubt. I don't like if somebody else is cruel to somebody in front of me. I can't take that at all. It hurts me and interferes with me because I'm maybe, I don't know, too sensitive a creature. I don't know. But generally in my experience, I've had pretty good vibe with people. And also I think that it comes down to the work, so if there is somebody's vibe that is outside of mine, or if it doesn't seem to be easy, I think I concentrate even more on the words, I concentrate even more on the characters, and I concentrate even more on the relationship that is not necessarily personal, but is happening on screen. But that to me is the play zone. So if I can just get into it with a person, and I've been lucky enough to work with like incredibly talented people, then the rest of the stuff won't matter. I can walk off set and talk to somebody else.
Right. Well, this project is somewhat, I guess you would call it like emotionally autobiographical, in terms of a lot of what comes into play is something that Liz like dealt with in some way. Obviously not running over somebody, but
or so we think.
Yeah. But talk to me about the conversations you had with her in terms of trying to understand like where she was coming from while writing this, and how that can inform your performance.
Well, she was very open with me about certain things, and while she says it's not autobiographical, it is certainly like commenting on certain things that she's been through, and Judy's struggles, and Liz has written about her struggles with fertility. I think that came from a real place from her, and from some other people in the writers' room brought in their experiences with other things, and I think it boils down to, and so she was very open with any of those feelings and conversations, and that's of course helpful, especially when you know where something's coming from. For me, that gives it context and depth, and I'm always looking for real ways to examine things. I think that's a fun thing about my job, is you get to examine things that are outside of your own life experience, but also there's I think we all bonded and understood loss, and the show in the first season, even though it gets funny and crazy and all of those things, it really at the heart of it is about loss and how you deal with that. And I think everybody deals with it differently, and I think it can be tragic, and I think it can be comedic at times. I think if you can't laugh through certain things like that, then you don't make it through. So there was a through line of truth with all of that in terms of dealing with great loss and trauma.
Especially for Judy, because she feels like she doesn't have a right to feel the way that she does. Yeah,
Judy doesn't really get to own her feelings very easily, which I think is wish fulfillment when she meets Jen, because Jen is so angry, and Jen is entitled. She has this anger and she lashes out, and I think Judy watches that and thinks that's so admirable, even though a lot of people are terrified of it.
Yeah. Was there anything that was hard for you to grasp or understand in terms of Judy's decision making? Like, were you trying to?
Yes, there are many questionable decisions.
Like, what did you have long conversations with Liz about? Like, was it like, why doesn't she just tell her already, or why doesn't what was one of the things that you were like, I don't get this?
There were certain things with the Steve character. Does he show up yet? Yeah, he shows up. Yeah. There were certain things that she does with that character that I was like, okay, how do I justify this? But I found it every time, because I think that Judy at some point decides that everything she is doing is for Jen. And if she can make Jen better, she's okay for it. And there's a moment where Jen talks about her husband, and she says that she might be glad that he's gone. And there's this, one of my favorite moments, because I've got to play it outright, was just this little switch turns on in Judy where she finally like lets her shoulders down, because for so long she wonders if she's a terrible person and she was an accident. So for me, that kind of stuff is, those moments in there, I think, justify anything that seems absurd that she would do. I mean, the idea that she would, what she does, I don't know how many people have seen the show or not. I don't want to wreck too much, but the idea that like when she moves in, like all of these things that she does, in my mind, had to have a real reason why. And every time she was lying, there was a bit of truth in it for her. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, keeps her going, because if the end result, if she can make it good by the end, then she'll have redeemed herself in some way.
How often were you thinking about what would I have done in this situation? There's a lot of moments, like as a viewer, I was like, would I have told Jen that? What would I have done in that situation? How often were you thinking? And
a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, and then you have to ask that question, and you have to answer that question for yourself, which is the good thing about the human mind. If you ask it a question, it will come up with an answer. That's why you should always be careful what you ask yourself. But so I constantly ask myself, my God, what is she doing? Why is she, and then I find it. And once I find it and it makes sense to me, then it's easy to play. Mm-hmm. And until I find it, I don't rest. I keep picking at Liz, going, wait, why would she do? Okay, when would she do this? When did this happen? How did this happen? So I sort of I don't give up on those kinds of details.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to go back a little bit. I mean, I think when we look back at our career, we sort of romanticize the early days and think like, I knew I would make it all along. But talk to me.
Who says that?
I don't know, people, like, I don't know. But I mean, what do you remember about that moment where you told yourself, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to pursue acting. Like, that must have been a scary thing, because actually doing it is one thing. So what do you remember about, like, saying to yourself, okay, let's do this, and how am I going to do it? And what were you worried about, and what do you remember about those early days?
Well, they're feelings that I still feel sometimes. I mean, to be honest, like, you never know what your next thing will be. I mean, I've been very lucky. I've worked since I've started. I've consistently worked, and I like working. But those are questions that sort of don't necessarily go away entirely. I don't know. I always say that I think I must have had a tiny screw loose to think that I could do it, because I didn't really know anybody. I grew up in Northern California, and it's different than growing up in Southern California, where you see people who are actors at the supermarket. Like, that was not my experience. We didn't really know anybody who was doing it. And I have a very practical family. So I don't know. There was this thing in me once I did a play when I was a kid, and I was an old lady in The Music Man, and I sang Pick a Little, Talk a Little, and I stuffed my bra, and there was in front of this audience in my hometown, and for whatever reason, people liked what I did, and I felt that. And it was like, oh, wait a minute. I think I love this. And I was pulling weird stuff out of my hat that nobody else was doing, but it was exciting me. And then once I started sort of being involved with theater more, I had sort of felt like I had found my people. I think I was an incredibly sensitive child, and I didn't know what to do with that. I was sort of told I was too sensitive. And when I found theater and being able to tell a story, and, empathy and emoting, and not only that, but storytelling and literature and all of those things, it sort of made sense. I don't know if that's a great answer to the question, and then I just was like, I'm gonna do this, and I remember my mom saying, somebody in your generation is going to be a great scientist, a great, artist, a great writer, there's no reason why it can't be you. And I thought, okay, well, I'm gonna try. I didn't know that it was possible, but I was gonna try, and I wasn't gonna stop, and I'm still trying.
What do you remember about moving out to LA? Like, what research did you do in terms of where should I live? And
well, I think I was very lucky, because I came to college in Los Angeles, and I was choosing between Los Angeles and New York because I wanted to study theater. and I ended up I do have a degree in theater, but I'm from Northern California. I'm very close to my family, and I didn't want to go that far. So I chose Los Angeles, and I actually had a scholarship to go somewhere closer to home for theater, and I decided, no, I want to go, you have to be in LA or New York. And I went to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles, which I see some people here. And I think it was a really wonderful choice for me because the school was small enough that I didn't feel terrified by like the idea of like 30,000 people in my class. It was a very small school. It had a good program. I was able to be on stage, on my first year, which isn't the case in every college, that you go to. And I was also in close proximity to Los Angeles and show business. So I started auditioning at, I think my third year in school, or as soon as I was on The Price is Right when I was 18. I was like, I'm gonna be on TV. And I was surrounded by the business. But the great thing about coming to school in Los Angeles for me was that by the time I got out of school and it was time to try to really just devote my life to being an actor, it was, and try to be in SAG was such a big deal. Like all of those things, I had a community of people that I had met and loved, and I had friends. So I didn't have to move to Los Angeles as a fledgling actor and try to make friends, on the street or in a bar or in a, I had a grounded support system of true friends that I'm still friends with to this day that I found in college, and we were all sort of doing theater or film or that kind of a thing. So I think I was very lucky to have created a support system out here for myself while I was auditioning and while I was getting rejected, while I was, trying to figure out who I was and how I was going to do it.
When did you when you're starting out and breaking in, Hollywood's a hard place to break into, right? Yeah. And especially when you're young, it's hard not to sort of compare yourself to other people and what's happening in their careers. Yeah. How was that for you to sort of navigate? When did you finally come to terms with, I have to just focus on myself. I can't think about everyone else and what's happening for them?
Well, I think that ebbs and flows. I think, even when you get to a certain area, you're like, oh, why am I not doing all of these types of things? I don't ever compare myself precisely to another person, because I feel like the one thing that you have going for you in this industry, and if you can hold on to it, it's your one asset is you. So whatever your skill set is, whatever your gifts are, whatever your voice, your look, whatever that is, that's you. That's only you. There's only one of you. And when you walk into an audition room and there are 30 people that look similar to you, you still have to remember, well, you know what? I'm me. This is coming from me. This is coming from my perspective. I'm reading the story this way. It's going to be different, and it's that part's hard to hold on to, I think. And when you really hold on to that, when I've really walked into something and been like, I'm just going to do what I feel. I'm not going to worry about anybody's expectations. I think that's always paid off the best. So what was the question? God, I don't know.
When you sort of reached that point where you felt like I'm at a place where I'm not concerned about other people's careers.
So I think that comes and goes. I think you have moments where you feel very strong, and you have moments where you feel like, oh, am I doing this right? I still have those moments. I always had those moments. I think there was just it's funny because people ask me if I'll let my child be an actor. And my answer to that is, if she wants to do it, there will be no stopping her. Because when I wanted to do it, there was no stopping me. Even people who told me I couldn't do it, people who told me I wasn't the right size, I wasn't the right look, I wasn't the right whatever it was, all of those things, I still wanted to do it. And against all of the odds. So I feel like it's that thing inside of you that just doesn't want to quit, that I don't know where that exactly comes from, if it comes from, something beyond us, or if it just is a drive inside of you, or if it's something you're missing. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that it's just in you if you want to do it, and there's just quitting doesn't, you won't let yourself quit. And then I also think, a lot of it has to do with people supporting you along the way. I think that the times that people have said, like, I really loved you and such, or, all of those things sort of help you think, okay, well, then maybe I am. It doesn't tell you that you're doing the right thing, but it helps you, it guides you if you're there for being open to it, to allow you to accept it and to keep going. Like, the encouragement helps as well.
You had some very enviable early credits, step by step.
Right. Which I pull off, if you've ever seen that episode, I pull off a magical pool table trick.
Step by Step, Boy Meets World.
Yes. Which I still get hate mail about.
Yes, Clueless, the series. Talk to me about, like, did you feel like in that moment when you were in that period, did it feel like, oh, I'm riding high. These are the shows that, like, people my age are watching. I mean, they were shows I was watching. Did it feel like, okay, this is it. This is like I'm on the right path?
It felt like the best thing in the world. Whenever even if still when I get a job, I'm still like, oh, there's just like I've won the lotto feel about it, because you know how difficult it is. It's just, for those one jobs, for the few jobs you're talking about, I must have gone on 100 auditions and someone said no, and then I took to heart everything that they said was wrong with me. So, or, it was just me and two other people. Like if I had a dime for every time, it was like, well, it was between you and two other girls and they went a different direction. But and that happens to everybody. And I kept thinking, well, someday I'm going to be the one girl, and they're going to be like, God, I hate that girl. But I think that I just those roles at that time. Number one, I needed the money, and number two, I wanted to be in SAG more than anything. I wanted health insurance. I needed the basics, really. I was like, I was living off of those jobs, and I was also ecstatic to have those jobs. They were like, and every time I went somewhere, they treated me really well, and that's exciting too. I went from like
that they were Corey and Topanga fans.
I know. Yeah, those Corey and Topanga fans, I want to take the time right now to apologize in front of everybody. I am very sorry I broke them up. I didn't watch that show, so I didn't realize the gravity of breaking up that couple.
It was a big deal.
And still 20-something years later, it is a big deal.
Yes. Huge deal. We're in this period of like too much content. There's so much out there. I mean, we were talking about this earlier. I know we can sort of talk about what the benefits are very easily in terms of opportunity and stuff, but what do you see as the drawbacks? I mean, as an actor, does it make you nervous that not enough people are going to see what you're working on? Does like the financial aspect concern you at all, like in terms of residuals and all that stuff? Like, what do you think about this time we're in as an actor?
I think we're finding ourselves in this time. I think there's something really, I think it's twofold. I think there's something really beautiful about it and the amount of content, and I think that it's allowing for sort of underrepresented people to have more opportunity, which I think is a great thing. I think there are different writers and directors and actors and people getting more opportunity because there's so many platforms and there's so many ways to choose other voices to listen to instead of the like sort of normal down the middle kind of voice. I think that on the other side of it, I think it's so hard to keep track of what to watch, so you rely a lot on word of mouth, which that's a great thing. But then I think it can get convoluted with a lot of social media stuff. So I think sometimes of course you're like, oh, I hope people find the good. But I think, over time, eventually, I mean, if Freaks and Geeks is any indicator, I think, we got canceled and it wouldn't have lived if it didn't come back on streaming and, DVD, and then it went to streaming and it would be gone forever. So I think that eventually, like, what is good will find a way and people will find it. I enjoy the opportunities that are out there. I mean, the losing residuals I think is a little tough. I think, as you go on as an actor and you think of like, do I really want to work 14 hours a day when I'm 78 years old? I don't know. I hope to still be doing it, but that's a lot of hours. So I think that the residuals are nice for that. So I hope that at some point there's some kind of like, leveling of that, because I think it helps actors as we go on in our lives and things happen when you can't work the same way that you used to, or that the opportunity is not there anymore. I think those are something that we all rely on.
Right. Well, I'm going to withhold. There you go. No. I'm going to withhold all my Freaks and Geeks and ER questions because I want to get to the audience questions. Jessica asked, did you and Christina Applegate improvise on set? You talked a little bit about that. Yeah. Maybe like sort of share some other moments.
We improvise a lot. Where is Jessica? Are you still here, Jessica? Jessica took off.
Oh, sorry, Jessica.
Jessica's really, she's not real. Jessica's me, I wrote that question. No, Well, Jessica, wherever you are. No, we do.
She's watching this later.
We improvise a lot. We do, and we always do what's on the page. And the writers, we have such incredible writers, and so we do what's on the page. But it's always really fun, especially the Jen and Judy stuff, because we know each other so well now, and the characters are so well defined. Which I always say, one of the things I loved about the script is that you couldn't, a lot of times you get a script and there's 2 female characters in it, and you kind of can interchange their lines, and you can kind of interchange their characters. Oh, we'll just give it to this character to say or that character to say, and they're not as defined. But Jen and Judy are very defined. So we have a good time going back and forth.
I was going to say, can you at least share in season 2 if some of Jen's curse language carry over? Like, are you saying...
she doesn't give that up. She doesn't give that
up. But are you cursing more?
Oh, am I cursing more?
Being around her so much.
Being around, that's a good question. Maybe I haven't even noticed.
Okay. I'm just curious. We have a question from Jeff. I hope Jeff's here.
Jeff. All right, Jeff, you stay.
Yes, Jeff. What role that you have done do you deem your best work?
Ooh, that's a tough one, Jeff. That's a tough one. I mean, anytime you're doing a role, it seems like it's the best and the toughest and the most challenging. And I do think that Judy has tremendous challenges in it, like the layers there, especially in that first season of like hiding all of that, and the range. That was the allure of the character for me, because I don't think that has come along in the package that it has come along for me, and to see the show and to see what the tone is, and it seems fresh to me. So that was very exciting. I'll give you a couple top choices. I will always have a soft spot for Lindsay Weir. That was like at that time when I was choosing that role, because there was a couple other roles that I was up for, and I wasn't guaranteed any of them, but I had to choose which to go for. It was so different from anything that was on the table at any time for a teenage show, and that character I just thought was so smart and so special, and also that group of people was smart and special. And then, I mean, it's really hard. I've been really lucky. I've had lots of really cool, different things to do.
In the past year, you've done so many different things.
That was on purpose, so thank you for noticing. Yes. I tried to do as many different things at once, so that because to me it was always fun to try to show a range. That was sort of the challenge for me. But and there was a movie that I did called Return that I loved very much. That was very different than anything else that I'd done, directed by Liza Johnson, who actually directs the first 2 episodes of season 2.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So those are a few of my top. But I'm sure I'll go home and be like, oh, I should have said.
It'll be too late.
Yeah.
Francisco asks, in dealing with grief, has anything surprised you that came up? And if so, how did you deal with it?
Where's Francisco? Hi, Francisco. Dealing with grief. I've dealt with some grief, some traumatic grief, some sudden grief of some young people. And the idea of sort of getting through that is always tough. And I think that the show tapped into some of those feelings for me at certain times. It was more overwhelming than I imagined it would be. And there are some moments in there that are improvised. If you see, there's a passing that happens in the show, and there's a line that I improvised, and it just came out because it hit something very personal to me. And I have a line in there that says, I didn't get to say goodbye. And that wasn't written, it just came out, and it was based on a friend that I had that passed, and it just sort of was my goodbye to her.
The reason that I asked, is that I think this show really gets it right, because it has so many different feelings and layers, so I wondered, so thank you for...
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I'm sorry, because you must recognize it from your own grief, so I'm sorry.
Final question from Troy. I'm assuming
Are
you're
you Troy? No.
Or just a big supporter of Troy.
A Troy fan.
Yeah, a Troy fan. What would the actress you are today tell or advise the actor you were, say, on Freaks and Geeks?
Oh, I would tell her to just enjoy it. Because I think that I was scared a lot, and I'm still scared. I still get scared. You still want your work to be
right
at a certain level, and sometimes it's in your control, and sometimes you think you're doing your best work and it's not, and sometimes you're doing your best work and you had no idea. You're always trying your best, but you can never sort of tell what comes out on the screen. I think I would tell her to be kinder to herself, is what I would say. I think I was very hard on myself. I think I still can be. Very supportive of others, but I think I'm my own worst critic. So I would tell her to calm down that inner critic and just enjoy. I once did an experiment. And because I was getting overly self-critical. And I did a role, and I said, and I'm not sure I know exactly what role it is even to this day, but I said to myself, this time you're going to just enjoy what you're doing. You're not going to criticize yourself, and you're going to let it go after you've done it. You're not going to sit home and think, at 4 a.m, wake up and go, I could have. And we'll see if it comes out the same, better, or worse. And it came out the same, if not better. So it was a good exercise for me, because so often people will say, well, if you're your own worst critic, it's good for you. That's how people are good. And I think maybe that works for a certain amount of time, but after a while, it'll wear you down. And the really great people I've worked with, they have like an inner mechanism to tell them when it's good and when it's, because I watch how other people work too, and I pay attention. I think they have an inner mechanism that tells them like what's good and what's BS, like a good BS meter in terms of like what is real and what is coming across. But I also think that there's a self-care there that I think that you need in order to sustain, because if you can't take care of yourself, you'll fall apart with the hours and the all of the critiquing that happens outside of you. So that would be my advice.
It's advice for all of us, I think. So take that home with you.
I'm going to take that advice to myself. I'm giving that advice to myself right now too.
Yes. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Really appreciate you coming out. Thank you.
Thank you for all your questions.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you guys.